Hi everyone, thank you for joining me on the channel. Every once in a while something new comes along. There's an evolution in PixInsight, or there is some new technique or method for approaching a certain kind of processing. Today I'd like to show you exactly one of those evolutions. I'd like to demonstrate a new way to approach narrowband image processing within PixInsight. Now, it's not as if there are going to be new colors that you're going to see. The colors are the same. But the approach, the way in which you do narrowband image processing by leveraging the different scripts and processes that are available, you can now do it in a way that I think is both easier, reproducible, and most especially for me, I think this is the most fun way to approach doing this kind of imaging. So I hope you agree once you see it. Now, this video is a highly edited version of what I actually have in my new course called Narrowband FastTrack. It is a course that introduces how to do narrowband image processing, but of course within it are many ideas, innovative ones just like the one that you're about to see. But I do feel that this should be publicly known because it is a new way to interact with PixInsight and produce really beautiful images. Now, the data that you're about to see I'm working with comes from Russ Croman. It's the Rosette Nebula. It's a really beautiful data to work with, but it is no different than data that I was supplied in my course. People get to follow along with the data just like this in my course so that you can see every step of the way. And all of these steps are perfectly, and I think generally applicable to anyone's data. So I look forward to seeing what you do with this technique. Please comment down below and especially show me the images that you create using this idea and see if it is as powerful as I think it really is. I hope you enjoy. I begin with a set of data that comes from Russ Croman. It contains the HSO data, narrowband data, plus broadband RGB stars. Now I'll show you these narrowband images, and the S2, using this particular method, we're going to set aside for the moment. It's beautiful. Instead, we're just going to be using the H-alpha and the O3. Looking at the values of brightness between the two, it's easy to see that the O3 is significantly bright. I don't need to make it any brighter. It's already bright enough. So while it's in its linear state, I'll do nothing more than go ahead and apply some deconvolution using Blur Exterminator. Since there are no stars, we're not going to sharpen any stars. We turn off the automatic PSF and we set the appropriate diameter for the symmetric PSF that'll be used to sharpen this image. Of course, we pick a non-stellar sharpening amount and then apply it to each of these images. We'll see that we do get the kind of sharpening in the very brightest features, and zooming in will show us the results of what it looks like. Blinking back and forth here, you can see the difference between the hydrogen alpha and the O3 here. Here's before and after. Now, with this technique, we are going to produce an HOO image first. So we're going to go ahead and get channel combination and put the hydrogen alpha image in the red channel, and then put the O3 in the blue and the green. So here is our HOO image. We can just go ahead and hit the little auto stretch, and we get an image that looks like this. Now, of course, the next thing to do is go right to narrowband normalization. It will help not only with the background, but just to kind of balance out the signal strengths that we get. Of course, I don't really want it to change anything with regards to the hydrogen alpha red color, so we're going to turn off any blending, and we get a straight HOO image with a hydrogen alpha being mapped as red, and the O3 getting kind of a blue-green color because it is existing in both the blue and the green channel. Now, it's being stretched a lot by the automatic screen stretch, so I'm going to choose a level to initially stretch the data. And I'm picking an overall brightness level here that I think will work, because what I'm going to be doing next is called a slow stretch. It's simply applying a semi-transparent mask to the image in order that when we stretch the central part, it doesn't get as bright as quickly as the outer parts. Now, you can do this all in one with something like GHS, but in this case, I think just a simple circular mask does a fine job. So we are going to permanently stretch the image just as you see it there. That degree of stretch, not very bright yet, is where we want to be. So given that, we want to make our mask with the game script. We want it to be a binary mask, and we'll go ahead and create a circular mask here. You don't want to go too far because, we're going to use convolution in a moment to blur this and make it a very soft-edged mask. So with convolution, of course, we need it to be a very, very large scale. This is a huge circle in this image. So very large scale convolution, and if once is not enough, you can do it twice. Given that I still want this to be semi-transparent and in the correct sense, we need it to be dark, so the mask needs to be black protecting the areas that we don't want to become too bright. And then we don't want it completely black though, semi-transparent. So I'm going to change black so there should be no blacks, and we'll just have some degree of grayness in our mask. This will allow for when I apply the stretch, it'll still be stretching the center a little bit, but not as quickly as the outer parts that are beyond this grayish mask. So we'll call this a central mask because it is central to the nebula. I need to apply this to the image. And then we don't need to actually show it here. And now at this point, we can go ahead and do the stretch. Now I'm just going to be using the MTF here to stretch the image. With the real-time preview, we can watch the degree to which this happens. Here I go. You'll see that the center is stretching, but not nearly as fast as the rest of the frame. What I'm going to demonstrate now is the usage of HDRMT. It's kind of a tricky process to use, and it does take a little bit of practice. So I'll begin by trying to find a brightness level that I believe will brighten the center part enough that we can see how HDRMT helps reduce the overall brightness of what's going on in the center, of this case, of the Rosette Nebula. So you can see that we are going to change the mask intent, where now we're going to just operate with HDRMT on only that center part where it's brightest. Here it is with the 8 layers and that particular scaling function. And that, I think, is a good place to be. So this really was the first step of this process. It is to make an HOO image. Once we have this in hand, as long as it looks good, then we can set it aside and start working with the S2, the colorized version of the S2. So I'm going to clean things up here. I'll remove the mask, and then we'll look a little more closely at this image and discover, of course, it's quite noisy. So now is an opportunity, again, as part of the preparation for this nice HOO image, let's go ahead and remove the noise using Noise Exterminator on this image. We will do a similar operation, of course, on the S2, but we'll do it independently over there. So we've removed the noise. It's not a full amount, but again, doing things incremental is almost always the best way to go. Now we're going to come to the fun part where we're going to be colorizing the S2 data. And what becomes important here is first we'll do like we did previously, is the same steps. We want to make sure we're consistent. So we're going to use Blur Exterminator, actually the same settings, and use deconvolution. You can see that some of these filamentary structures are going to be much sharper now with BXT. And the noise, right? The noise, again, is going to be an issue, and now would be a good time, before we colorize this image, to go ahead and knock down the noise a little bit. It doesn't need to be the full amount. We don't always need to go full strength when we're doing these kinds of operations. And then finally, what becomes important with regards to colorization is we're going to need to choose a stretched version of this image. And that means we're going to do what I would call thresholding, because we're going to choose the amount of S2. We don't need to do a full amount. The amount of this information that we want to have come in and colorize, in this case, the hydrogen alpha, whatever color it is we want to be our third color, it's going to affect, especially where the hydrogen alpha overlaps with it. And where it doesn't overlap, we'll just have our primary mapped color, whatever we choose. So thresholding means that I'm going to choose a black level and an overall brightness, relatively gray, that we're going to incorporate this information into our result here. So this is a good level. You can see we have mostly grayish features here. We're not showing a lot of that really faint background because that's just going to add color to the background. We don't need that. We just need it on the brightest features. So going to Narrowband Color Mapper, we can colorize this image to whatever color we want. Now first we're going to turn off the SDF here because it's just making it bright. Remember, we have a stretched image. And then we choose a hue. I'm going to choose a value that gives us something like a yellow or a gold yellow. And we want it to be a relatively strong saturation, but not totally saturated. If you do total saturation, you'll run into some clipped color values, and that doesn't necessarily help you. So this would be a good level, and then we just update that layer and colorize it. Having made that new colorized version, this will be our working image, but you can see some of those bright spots there we could probably attend to just with another application of HDRMT. Now I'm going to make it a smaller number of layers because we want to operate on even a smaller scale. We don't want the overall brightness to change, but only on the very brightest bits, and that's small scale structure. This instance that I just did of 6 layers, it's not quite enough. So I'm going to go down to 5 layers and an even smaller scaling function, and we'll find that we can probably do a little bit better, in some of these bright areas here. Now, if you thought that the colorization of the S2 data was fun, wait till you get to this part. This is where the real fun happens. Now we're going to have our HOO image, and we get to blend it with the S2 data using Image Blend. So as the base image, we load the HOO data, and the blend image that we want to incorporate, well, that's the S2. Of course, it's outputted by Narrowband Color Mapper, so we have this Narrowband Color Mapper image. We want to blend it with Screen, and this is a very bright result. This is like incorporating all of that S2. But as I mentioned earlier, we can continue to do a kind of thresholding where we can change basically the histogram, the degree to which we have some brightness in that S2 data. So we can adjust the midtones to make it brighter or dimmer. I made it a little dimmer there. And then I can even raise the black point, which means that the S2 just won't even be a part of the very faintest parts of the image, only where it's bright. And then where it is bright, by having that highlights increased a little bit, it will really increase its significance. And we can operate on both images. It's not just one, right? We can operate here on the blend image, but then, as you'll see me do here in a moment, once I've determined the final results that I like here, I'll go to the base image, raise its black level a bit, and increase the contrast of the overall result. And just look at this result. All we've done are the two parts of the step. Make an HOO image that looks good. Don't make it overly bright. And then incorporate the S2 and just look at this small feature. It has all of the elements. It has the HA, it has the S2, it has the O3, all having significant representation in the image using the simple process of colorization followed by blending. Now, I'm going to take out some of the green here of the overall O2 color. I like to tend more towards the blue than the green. I'm not a big fan of green. In fact, that's an important consideration with its entire methodology. There are no greens to fight in this particular way of approaching creating an HSO image. So at this point, we are really looking pretty strong here, but it's the color management that I want to work on next. And there are a number of tools. This one, selective color correction, is a fantastic script in and of itself. And the regions that I'm interested in working on would be, in this particular script sense, called low saturation, which is basically what we see there is blue and green. That's the low saturation. So by taking out yellow in those regions, you can see the blue that now presents itself. Also, raising the magenta will help a little bit to give us more of a kind of a blue, purple blue coloration. We don't need any more cyan, of course, and maybe even just taking the blue up a little bit. We can also increase the brightness of the luminance just to make that glow a little bit more, increase the contrast again for some of the bright parts where we've lost the contrast because of HDRMT. That's going to help bring a little bit of solidity, if you will, some substance to the center there. And even a little bit of a saturation increase can also be quite good at this point. So I apply this to the image, and here we go. We can look at where we were and where we are now. That, I think, again, was an incremental, but a step in the right direction. I hope you agree. Now, at this point, we need to take that image and put in the stars. So I'm going to start working with the RGB data, and we do the typical steps that you would do with RGB data, which is to get out channel combination, create an RGB image. And this image, I'm not going to even worry about doing very much to it. I'm not even showing you the unlinked screen stretch. It looks fine. SPCC is going to do a fine job. When it does the color correction, it'll correct the background as well as the color of everything else. And there's the result. That looks great. Those are linear, and you can see that the Rosette Nebula looks exactly how you would expect it, pink, with the various colors of stars, of blue and yellow and so on. So we remove the stars because that's what interests us, not the nebula, but in this case, just the stars. Now, ultimately, we're going to need to determine the degree to which we're going to display them. Using Blur Exterminator first is going to give us the size of stars that we want to work with. They're going to become smaller, and of course, this time we're sharpening stars, and we're turning off the non-stellar in this case, because we're just working with the stars. So we can see the results here. It wasn't like a big amount, but it was just enough to clean up the stars and make them look nice. Now we're going to choose the degree to which we're going to incorporate the stars just by choosing the correct stretch. This is the linear image still, so we want to stretch it in a way that we think it's going to look good once we screen it in to the starless result. And with this, I hope that you can see the power of this particular technique. I believe it is the easiest way to incorporate S2 data, or any third color weak channel, into an already dual band or dual colored or mapped image. So to wrap up, this technique comes from my decades of experience in processing astronomical images. Here, I'm using fundamental principles of image processing, not just to make a picture, but instead to make a new way to process images. This is unique in PixInsight. It's a completely new approach to working with narrowband data. This is why I got so excited to work with Mike Cranfield on the scripts of Narrowband Color Mapper and Image Blend. Together, those two scripts, in combination with a few others, really allows for not only an easy way, I just think it's a lot of fun to use these particular methods to get these kinds of colorful images. I hope you, too, find that it's fun and you take advantage of the demonstration shown here in your own work.